Welcome back, Year 9. This is the second video for our annotations of the poem Circle and Squares. If you haven't done the first one, please make sure you do, because it's not going to make a lot of sense if you jump in the middle. All right, so for number 2, we are up to step 3 in annotating our poem. So this is discover and mark rhyme scheme using a new letter for each and rhyme within the poem. Okay, so we all know what rhyming is. I hope we all know what my rhyming is. And so we're going to try and find if there's any rhyming within the poem. Rhyming can happen within the the lines or at the end of the lines. So you guys might remember doing this in year 7 and year 8. Okay, rhyming is still a big part of poetry, but it doesn't have to rhyme to be a poem. We all know that. So let's just have a look. Now this up here isn't rhyming. This is repetition. So we're not going to worry about that. I've learnt many things from my family elders who have grown to realize that my life travels in circles. My Aboriginal culture has taught me that universal life is circular. I always want to say secular. Circular. Um, no rhymings in there. When I was born, I was not allowed to live with my family. I grew up in a white man's world. Still no rhyming. We lived in a square house. We picked fruits and vegetables from neatly fenced square plot. We kept animals in square paddocks. We sat and ate in the square table. Sat and ate are close, but I'm not going to say that's a rhyme. We sat on square chairs. I slept in a square bed. I looked at myself in a square mirror, and did not know who I was. One day I met my mother. I just knew this meeting was part of our healing circle. Then I began to travel. I visited places I had never been before. I visited places that I had been before, but this time I sat down with family. We gathered closely together in big round campfires. We ate bush tucker, feasting on round ants and berries. We ate meat from animals that lived in round burrows. We slept in circles on beaches around our fires. We sat in the dirt on our land that belongs to a big round planet. We watched the moon grow into a magnificent yellow circle. That was our time. I've learnt 2 different ways now. I am thankful for this. That is part of my circle life. Ugh, sorry. That is part of my life circle. My heart is round like a drum, ready to echo the music of my family. But the square within me still remains. The square hole stops me in my entirety. Sorry, those words are starting to mix me up. Okay, so do we have any rhyming schemes? I really don't think we do. I've read through this poem now twice, and I know that there's a beat. I can feel that there's a beat forming every time I read it, like so many, you know, sounds per line, creating beat, creating rhythm, but not creating rhyme. So let's have a look next at our next step, which is number 4, which is what I was talking about, the rhythm and rhyme and syllables. So we're going to count the number of syllables in each line and mark that number at the end of the line. Now, this first part is going to be hard because I keep mispronouncing this word, and every time I say it differently. So I'm going to guess that it's a Yankutiyatgara. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can you guys hear me clapping? I'm not sure if you can. So that's how we work out our syllables. I know it might sound a little bit primary school, but it actually is the best way to do it. Okay, so I was born Yankatajatjara. I was born. Sorry, I forgot to count while I was clapping. So I was born Yankan Jara. So that is 9. My mother is Jankanyatjara. Again, we have 9. Her mother was Jankanyatjara. 9. My family is Jankanjatjara. So that's 10. I'm going to pause it here and I'll let you guys do this on your own. And when we come back, I'll fill out the rest of them. Alright guys, now we are back and you can see that I have made adjustments to my circles and squares sheet just here. I have gone through and I have worked out all the syllables for each line and I've just put them here. Oops, I missed one. I just put them here and what I did is I made them a smaller size so it wasn't so distracting to my eyes when I was reading. And I've made them a different color just so it looks pretty. Just to make it a little bit more different to the lines that I'm working with so I know that it's not part of the poem. So remember last week I told you guys that when you annotate a poem, it is going to get messy, and sometimes it's going to look really, really bad when you're done, especially if you're working with pen and paper. Like in that video I showed you guys last week with the student going through it, you could see how um, unorganized, I guess, her work looked at the end of it. But the whole point is to pull it apart. You're meant to be taking each line, and with each line, there should be like arrows going here and colors going there. And at the end, it's going to look messy, but it's going to be an organized kind of mess. Okay, so that's it for step 3. Now, looking at the rhyming and the rhythm, I'm going to say this is a free verse poem. A free verse poem. Oops, that one's not black. So a free verse poem is basically it's a very free kind of poem, as the name suggests. There doesn't have to be rhyming or rhythm or anything that has to reoccur. It's more about the emotions and the imagery that we get from the poem and the poet finding a way of expressing themselves without limitation. Okay, some of these lines do have very similar timing, but I definitely don't think she was going for anything in particular. Like even here, the stanzas are all different sizes. The rhythm is all different. There is no rhyming at all, as far as I could see when we did our read through. So yeah, I'm going to say this is a free verse poem. So we have that was syllables. Number 5. Sorry, I was just checking our sheet. So number 5 is identify figurative language used within the poem, and then think about the literal meaning of each figurative device. Now, if you guys want to go back and open up week 2, you'll remember this little video I asked you to watch. And here are all the different kinds of poetic techniques. Now, just looking at the poem, we've already read it through 3 times now as we've been working through it. I think we can cut some of these out. Like, I don't think there's any idioms in there. We've already looked at rhyme. Hyperbole, maybe. Onomatopoeia, I don't think there's any personification. Imagery, definitely. Simile, definitely. I'm pretty sure I saw at least one. Metaphor, maybe. So we can already cut out half of these because we've read the poem so many times now. You guys heard the author talk about it last week. I read it to you at the beginning of this series. I read it again as we were looking at the rhythm and the rhyme and the syllables. So we've gone through it a few times. We can sort of get an idea of what we're meant to be looking for. Now, when I'm working on figurative language techniques, this is the way I like to do it. I've already taken this list and I've printed it off, similar to how I did steps to annotate a poem. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. Just make sure you leave this open so that you can see the list that we're going through as you're working on your poem. So the first one we have is imagery. Now, imagery is anything that creates a picture in your mind. It's dealing with your 5 senses. So anything that pulls on your sense of sight, touch, hearing, taste, smell, I think that's all of them, then that's imagery. So let's have a look, and this is what we're going to have to do for every single figurative language technique. You start at the top, and you're like, okay, I'm looking for imagery. And you're like, I was born, Yakantaka Jara, my mother is, her mother is, my family is. Is that creating imagery? No. It is something else, but that's not on our list yet, so we're not going to look at it. No imagery. I've learnt many things from my family elders. I have grown to realize that my life travels in circles. My Aboriginal culture was taught to me that universal life is circular. Okay, we are again looking for imagery. So anything in that stanza that makes us think about, like that draws on our emotion, I guess, our 5 senses, is imagery. When I was born, I was not allowed to live with my family. That's definitely imagery. That one line brings up so many ideas. So we already know that she was from the stolen generation. So we can understand in a way how this could have happened because we know about her past. If we didn't know about her past, then you would still have an idea. Like it's still drawing on an emotional response. So I am going to say this is imagery, and I'm going to highlight it. And let's make it. Oops. When we're working with highlighting, we want to make sure that we leave all our colors as much as we can, because at the end this should look like there's heaps of colors on it. So we're not going to do that. What happens if we? No, that will be too hard. Actually, let's do. What's an easy one to read? That's what we're going to do. Oh, that's a little bit hard for me to read. Sorry, guys. Just trying to find an interesting way of highlighting stuff. Yeah, I can read that. Okay, so anything that's imagery, that is what I'm going to do to it. Okay, I grew up in a white man's world. Okay, here we picked fruits from. So that is calling on our sense of smell. We picked fruits and vegetables. Even if we've never actually done that ourselves, we know when we like go to the shops and stuff, when you walk into the produce section, there's a certain smell that comes with fruit and veggies. So she's definitely drawing on those. In a square mirror, I didn't know who I was. A new meeting was part of our healing circle. We began to travel. We ate bush tucker. Okay, again, smelling. We are smelling things. So let's make that this one. We ate meat from animals. Whoops, wrong button. Here we go. Beaches around our fires. Now, definitely this is drawing on our sense of smell as well as hearing. So we know what beaches sound like because most of us, I'm sure, have been to a beach at some time in our lives. We live in Australia. Beach is part of our culture. So we know what it sounds like, and that smell of a fresh fire is also playing with us here. So we're going to change that. We sat in the dirt. That is also imagery. We watched the moon glow a magnificent yellow circle. That's also imagery. If I can, there we go. All right, that was our time. Like a drum. Okay, so like I said before, we're going to go through this one by one, but while we're here, this is our example of a simile. Okay, my heart is round like a drum. So we're going to make that. Let's try that. Yep, blue. That's going to be our simile. And we're just going to add a note, comment. There we go. And we can write simile. There we go. But the square within me still remains. A square hole stops me in my entirety. All right, let's go back up here. And so for everything that we just highlighted, we just need to do a comment. And we're just going to say that this is imagery. I'm going to just copy and paste that. So bear with me while I quickly do this. Sorry guys. There we go. I just totally forgot what I was doing. There we go. Imagery, beaches around the fire. Yes. Why do I keep thinking I have to go over there to do this? Eat meat from animals. Again, comment. Wait, bush tucker. Fruits and veggies. And that's a image. Oh. There it is. And that's it. Okay, so that's all we have for imagery. I'm going to tick that off my list so that we don't go back. And we already did our simile as well. So we're going to ignore that. While we're here at this top one, I do want to talk about repetition. So this technically isn't on our list, I just realized. But it's such a big part of this poem that it would be silly if we didn't do it. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight... Yep, that's the one we're going to do for that. So this is all repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Repetition. Okay, and then I'm just going to do the last one. repetition. Oops, if I can spell it correctly. Oh my goodness. Repetition. For those guys who I haven't taught before, I have dyslexia, if you haven't noticed already, so I'm going to mix up some words and my writing isn't going to be great. So I apologize in advance for how awkward this might get. All right, let's go back into our repetition. So of course, we're going to have this repetition of circles. So we can change that to that. And so every time we find circles, I want us to circle, 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 circles. That's a circle. Okay, we're going to make it like that. That is our time. Okay, and also for squares, that's another one. Okay, so squares is repetition. Round is also repetition. So every time we find round, round, round. And it's really important. That's why I'm getting us to highlight it at the moment. Because it's really important that we see this repetition and what it means. Because when you're an author, you don't just do things for fun. Especially when you're a poet, every word, every syllable, every moment in your poem means something because you have such limitations on what you can and cannot say. So when she keeps talking and she keeps repeating for this whole thing, I think that's all we got for squares. Square, square, square. No, no, no. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to write very quickly. Repetition. There's that wrong spelling again. Sorry. Okay, so just going to go through this very quickly. Same thing we did before, where we just label everything we've done. We don't forget. Now look at all these things that are starting to collect. If you're working on paper, it should also start to look a little overwhelming, which is exactly what you want. Because we should have a whole heap of notes when we're done. More squares. Whoops. Square, square, square. So many squares. So I also sing to myself, which I didn't realize was a thing until I started making these videos. Okay, so that's all our, and we did this one already, didn't we? I'll just add these because one and that one. Okay. Alright, so that's repetition. And alliteration. Alliteration might be also something that she's done on purpose. I can't think of anything that came out obviously, but let's have a look. Slept in circles on beaches. No. Thankful for this. That's part of my life circle. My heart is round like a drum, ready to echo to the music of my family. Still remains a square hole stop sign. No, I don't think there's any of that. So let's take off assonance and consonants. Okay, so any personification, I don't think it's not personification exactly because she uses the square and the circle as symbols of her white life and Indigenous life. So I'm not going to say that that's personification, but we'll have a quick look because there might be. We sat in 8, we sat in... And see how like I've read this over and over? This is what you're going to do when you are given poems. You will be asked to read it over and over and to do different things each time you read it. Closely in the big round campfires. It's our time. Like a drum ready to echo. What were we looking for? Personification. My heart is round like a drum, ready to echo the music of my family. I want to say personification. No, it's not personification. With the mist still remains, the square hole stops me in my entirety. Okay, no, none of that. There's no onomatopoeia, I'm pretty sure. So, and like, it will get like this, once you've gone through it a few times, you'll be able to just say, oh, hyperbole. No, there's no hyperbole in here. The only one I think is a square hole stops me in my entirety, but it's still more of a symbolism. Like, it's not a literal thing. Um, Idioms, and we already know that there's no rhyme. So idioms are those words that we say, or phrases, I should say, phrases we say that mean something entirely different. Like it's raining cats and dogs. It's literally not raining cats and dogs. And I don't think there's any of those. Okay. All right. So if we have a look here, we've got some imagery, we've got some repetition, and we have, what else do we have? Imagery, repetition. Oh, that's it. I thought. Okay. So let's go through this because part of part 5 is think about the literal meaning. And so for this repetition, why do we think that she keeps repeating this? Now, the first time I ever read this poem, I was really taken back by the language of the first stanza. Remember, stanzas are the paragraphs of poetry, so this is the first stanza. Mostly I was taken back because I'd never seen that word before. I didn't know how to pronounce it. Um, I was lucky enough last year that one of my students was able to pronounce it for me because she knew the word due to her Indigenous heritage, but I still couldn't repeat it. And every time I've said it in these videos, I'm pretty sure I've said it differently each time. So, yeah, I find it very, not confronting. Confronting's not the right word. I find it very I find it very interesting that she chose to use this word. She applies it to herself, and straight away we are put into her line of thinking because she says, I was born Jankanta Jara. Sorry to anyone who knows how to actually say that word or who is listening. And so instantly I'm forced into her space. I know the language that she's using, and she's telling me that it was her mother's language, her mother's mother's language, like her family's language. And I guess this is how people coming in outside of Australia who don't speak English would feel when they first come here and they just hear everyone speaking English. She's very kind and only uses it in this one section, but I think it really does help put us into that right kind of mentality. And so that's the reason for that repetition in the beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go here and I'm just going to write that down. So the use of, whoops, repetition, the use of repetition, I can spell it correctly, here causes the audience to become, whoops, thank you, the use of repetition here causes the audience to be part of her world. We are forced to speak her native, well, let's call it Indigenous language, and to embrace its, what are we doing? We can speak her language and to embrace its use here in the poem. Alright, so where's our next, the next repetition I want to look at is here where she keeps repeating circles. Now, for those people that have been working on the PowerPoint, you'll notice at the end of every week, I've been adding these photos. Now, these are all images of art that is done by Indigenous Australians, and I added them there for one, break up the week and give you something pretty to look at, but also two, I wanted you to start thinking about how Indigenous people actually see their world. Okay, this isn't such a good example of what I'm trying to teach you. Let's go back to this one. A lot of Indigenous art, especially traditional Indigenous art, is dots. Thousands and thousands of dots over and over and over to fill in space, to create space. Let's have a look at this one here from week 2. Okay, again, we have all these dots, round, here, okay, little dots. This one here, do we have dots? Not so many. But dots is part of their culture. They see their world as a round thing, and she also says this in the poem. Um, I've learnt many things from my family elders. I've grown to realize that my life travels in circles. That's why she considers her Indigenous life her circle life. And that's why she calls her non-Indigenous life a square life, because circles and squares are very different. You cannot fit a circle into a square peg, and you cannot put a square peg into a round circle. They're different. They're both shapes. They are both never-ending. Okay, so squares, as you know, there's no space. There's no like little gaps, and same with circles. There's no little gaps. So they're similar in a way because they're her life. It's her life story. So they have to be similar, but they are very different. And she chose circles because circles are already part of her Indigenous culture. She was taught by the elders that her life is a circle. As an Indigenous woman, her life is a circle. And so she has applied this later on when she's talking about her Indigenous family, how round, and not only how round her life is, but how naturally round her Indigenous life is. So if we have a look at these lines here, we gathered closely together by big round campfires, feasting on round ants and berries that lived in round burrows. We slept in circles on a big round planet, okay, and watched the moon grow into a magnificent yellow circle. So she's put all these like round sounds, like being round, being circle, when she's talking about her Indigenous life. So whenever she's talking about things that are circular, okay, we can assume that it is because she is there it is, um, that she wants us to draw connections between these parts of her life. So circles and round are used as symbols for her Indigenous life. Okay, and then if we do the same thing with square, so if we talk about square, here we go. Okay, so squares are symbols of her um, adopted life. Okay, so she lived in a square house. This is how she grew up. It's still part of her, and she says down the bottom that it's still part of her, that she's learned 2 ways of living, and she's appreciative of both. Where is it? Here we go. But the square within me still remains. So no matter how much she talks about circles and how round her Indigenous way of life is, she hasn't forgotten that in her life she was also a square. The interview that we had with her last week, she spoke about how it was really important that even though she was finding connection to country in her Indigenous way of life, that her adopted parents didn't feel like she was trying to step away from them, or cut them out of her life. Because it was really important to her that they knew that she was appreciative of what they had done. It's a very complicated sort of emotion. Ali Kobi Eckermann spoke about how even though she was stolen, her mother, well, her German adoptive mother, didn't know that she was stolen. As far as she knew, this was a girl who didn't have a family, who needed a family. And so she opened up her home to this young girl, not knowing that she did have a family out there, that she was taken against her will and her mum didn't have a choice. So it's very hard for both sides of the family. And it's important to Ali Ali Kobi Ackerman, that she is paying tribute to where she came from, not just her Indigenous side, but also her German adoptive side. That's why that last line is in there. Okay, so we also have our imagery. Now, if we look at the imagery, the parts that we highlighted, there's not a lot of imagery when she's talking about her square life. Okay, there's a little bit. Okay, so when I was born, I was not allowed to live with my family. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Okay, so I'm just going to add some notes. Stolen generation and adoption. Um, Adoption and um, feelings of loss. Okay, all that sort of stuff. So she's not allowed to live with her family. Remember, this is a capital F family. So it's super important to her. And we already know that her capital F family is Indigenous. Her capital F family is Indigenous, capital F family elders. So when she says, I wasn't allowed to live with my family, we know that it's her Indigenous family because it's that same capital F. This one here, we picked fruits and vegetables. Okay, so homely and fresh. Um, but they were from it's a neatly fenced square plot. So it's not out in the bush, like they're not hunting for their fruits and they're not collecting from plants that naturally live in the area. This is from their personalized garden. Okay, so personal garden. So even though it's fresh and still beautiful, it's not free, which is very different to when we get down to her round family. So let's have a look what she's written about her round family. We had bush tucker. Now, what is bush tucker? This might be one of those words that you had to look up before. So I'm just going to go back, if we ignore that, and go to bush tucker. Define. Sorry. Okay, so food typically uncooked from plants and animals native to Australian outback and regarded as typical to Australia's colonial past. Oh, that's really interesting. Here, bush food is any food native to Australia and used as sustenance by Indigenous Australians. So when we look at the poem and we compare, we picked fruits and vegetables from neatly fenced square plots to we ate bush tucker, feasting on round ants and berries. Which one sounds nicer, like more yummy? The bush tucker. Okay, it sounds more delicious. They're feasting. They're eating the tucker. It's feasting. Bush tucker is definitely one of those words that we associate with Indigenous Australians. Okay, ants and berries. Here, it's very dry. We picked fruits and vegetables from neatly fenced square plot. Like, they didn't have to go out looking for their food. It's neatly fenced over there. They're not feasting. Feasting is such a strong word in this sentence. I didn't realize before. Um, to create such a juxtaposition, that's when we two things are being compared and they're very different. Excuse me. Um, yeah, so when we're comparing, and this also, sorry, I keep getting off track. If you look at how this stanza is and how this stanza is, they are both one, two, three, four, five, six. Yep, six. They're both 6 lines. And we can compare them almost against each other. So we lived in a square house. We gathered closely together in big round campfires. We picked fruits and vegetables from neatly fenced square plot. We ate bush tucker, feasting on round ants and berries. We kept animals in square paddocks. We ate meat from animals that lived in round burrows. We sat and ate at a square table. We slept in circles, in beaches, around our fires. We sat in square chairs. We sat in the dirt, in our land, which belongs to a big round planet. And finally, I slept in a square bed. We watched the moon grow to a magnificent yellow circle. She's completely comparing, almost line for line, her square life with her round life. And look at all the all the extra stuff we have. Just when we're looking at this one stanza alone, look at all the extra stuff she's put in here to help us understand her Indigenous life compared to her square life, her adopted life. Obviously, I feel as a reader of this poem that she feels more connected to her round family and that talking about her round family gives her more hope and she loves it more. She could talk about it. The lines are longer, okay? This is 10, 13, 13, 14, 12, 17, and 15. Here, the longest line is 13. The rest are short. So this is the same number of lines, but so much more information. The language she's using is way more passionate. She doesn't name the animals or give the animals any sort of defining features. While down here, we eat meat from animals that lived in round burrows. That gives us some sort of like imagery, obviously, about what she's talking about. All right, so sorry, let's get back to defining things. So we ate bush tucker. This line in particular, food that is native to Indigenous Australians. Yep, Australians. And then we had the meat from animals. We have stronger imagery compared to square living. Okay, beaches around our fires. This is a strong image of pre-colonial times for Indigenous Australians. Pre-colonial. So pre-colonial just means like before white man came. Indigenous. Make sure we're capitalizing them. We sat in the dirt. So gives the impression of freedom. Okay. And also being a little bit childish. So like proper adults generally don't sit in the dirt. However, she's sitting in the dirt on our land that belongs on this big round planet. Okay, so it gives an impression of freedom and childish. Gives the impression of freedom and childish. I don't know, connection. No, that's not what I want. The impression of freedom. let's say, and let's just say freedom. We'll get into bigger details later. Gives the impression of freedom. I like that. And then we watch the moon grow into a magnificent yellow circle. Okay, again, we are talking about what imagery does it give us. Okay, up here, they slept in a square bed. She couldn't see the moon or the stars or anything like that. But because now that she's outside, she got to watch the moon grow into a magnificent yellow circle. Like, think about what sort of picture is that putting into your head? What can you see right now when I say that? Especially after all these other lines of her sort of setting up what a typical night would look like with the campfires, and they're eating the ants and the berries, they're eating the food. They're all sitting around together in a circle. So it's like everyone is connected, and they watch the moon grow. So they got to watch the moon rise, which is not something I think a lot of people get to do. Okay, so this imagery here is to gives the audience a deeper understanding of her appreciation for the natural world. Okay, and like a drum. Okay, this is a simile. Okay, so my heart is round like a drum. So she's comparing her heart to a drum. Okay, and it echoes for her capital F family, which we forgot to do before. Is that no? We put it in gold. No, we highlighted in gold. That's what we did. Let's make that black again. Sorry, guys. Okay. So it's echoing for her capital F family. We know her capital F family is her round family, which we know is her Indigenous family because of all these symbols that she's put throughout this poem. So this use of simile gives us connects connects her heart to a physical round object that can connect her family to her Indigenous family. All right. So I'm going to leave it there for this. If you need to pause and go back and have a look at the notes, make sure you do that because I am going to, or your teachers will be looking for your own version of this on Google Classroom where you've either printed it out and you've written all over it, or you're doing what I'm doing here with the highlighting and stuff. So if you need to just pause it, scroll through, make sure you've got everything up to date like I have. If you've got extra stuff that I didn't put in there, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that you're reading it differently to me, which is why English is so great. Because 3, 4, 5, 6 people could all read this poem and all get slightly different variations out of it. If me and all the English teachers all had to do videos about this poem, they would all be slightly different because we would all draw different things out. And like I said before, me reading this, um, I've found a new connection that I didn't see before with these last 2 lines, and I've taught this poem before. So you can always see something new. Alright guys, I'm going to stop it here, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!